Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And today I am joined by Dr. Smart, who is actually a university college lecturer over in the US. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Thank you for having me. So, my name is Sheldon Smart, and I teach, for the purposes of your audience, I teach college, right? But that's also university students. And then I also teach university students who come over to the college to take classes. Because a lot of times when you take classes at a college, they have a tendency in the US to be cheaper, especially at a community college. They have a tendency to be a little bit cheaper than if you take it to a university. So I get the opportunity to teach college, uh, university students, trying to make that equivalent for you in the UK. So it's probably really confusing, but I teach college and university students. Let's just make it really simple.
Yeah, because we had
Oh,
that discussion literally just before
yes,
recording
yes,
this about the
yeah.
difference between like the education systems in the US
hmm
compared to the UK. So
Yeah.
it was actually quite
So
interesting.
it is, and that's a whole different video that we could do another time.
Yeah, definitely. But
And
first of all, I think I would like to just say thank you for reaching out to me on Instagram because I actually, as I said in your video, I didn't come across your channel, you came across mine. So I will leave all of Dr. Smart's links and to his Instagram and to his YouTube channel in the description box below if you would like to go over and sort of check out his channel and subscribe and like his videos and show him some love. So that'll be some really good for everyone to do that. All right, so I
thank
think in
you.
today's video, we're going to
Uh,
be talking about mental health in terms of addiction. So, everything ranging from drug and alcohol abuse, addiction of that sort of nature, all the way up until things like self harm. So, previously on my video, I did, in my channel, I did do a video about why self harm is an addiction. And I believe that you have experience working with the drug and alcohol side of the addiction. So, would you like to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I've worked in the drug and alcohol addiction area for 8 years now, a little over 8 years now, and so I started in 2013, and it is one of the most challenging areas to work in. Right? It's an area where I always love to say there's no drugs and alcohol doesn't discriminate when it comes to whether it's gender or sexuality or religion or wealth or whatever the case is. So I've seen it all in the last 8 years in terms of people struggling with their addiction. And then either because of the addiction, they have then ended up having mental issues, or they had perhaps some mental issues that then led to the addiction because then they started using a drug or whatever it is to be able to deal with their mental health situation. So I have a lot of experience, you could say, working in that area, in addition to also teaching college and university students.
So you are very busy then.
Yes.
You do a lot of things. You're on
Yes,
YouTube, you
yes.
teach,
Yeah.
you work in drug and alcohol. Like
I've got to be busy. I love it. I just
I
love it.
could never though.
I
That's the
love it.
thing. Like you've got the whole experience working with individuals who have the drug and alcohol addictions, or they have had mental health as a result of being addicted to a substance. I myself, I'm a recovering self harmer. So I self harmed probably from the age of 17 all the way up until I was 21. So it was a long battle for me. How much understanding do you have in terms of like people who self harm and the reasons why they might do it or anything like that? Have you ever come across anyone struggling of that nature?
Yes, I've come across people struggling with that. I also worked at one time for briefly. I worked with kids who were considered really difficult to deal with, to describe it in a
Mm.
you know professional way. Kids who had a lot of challenges, and so uh, I experienced, someone wanting to kill themselves, commit suicide, or kids self harming, and then it would be described as they were just looking for attention. That's
Yeah.
how it would be described a lot of times, because they were looking for attention. But you realize that if someone is self-harming, that there's definitely a mental health aspect going on there. There's definitely something wrong in terms of how that person is processing, whatever it is that they're dealing with, because they're obviously dealing with something. And a lot of times when you got to the root of it, for the age group that I experienced this with a lot, experienced this, the self-harming with, when you got to the root of it, it really was that they had other issues going on at home. A lot of times it might be from parents were divorced, and they weren't dealing with it well, or there was abuse going on in the home and they weren't dealing with it well. And I've had adults say that to me, as tell me that as well, say stuff like that to me. This is why they would have self-harm, or whatever the case is, or tried to purposefully overdose themselves. Um, Sometimes it was in a relationship that was, this is for the for someone that's older, it was in a relationship where they were being abused or something like that, and so they were self harming themselves so that somehow maybe the person would love them. So they would, if I tried to kill myself, maybe he would love me or she would love me, type of thing, because they would see my life, I'm
Yeah, and
trying
I
to take
think
my
that is
life.
a big misconception with
Yeah.
self-harm, suicide attempts, always bits and pieces. And a
Hmm.
lot of people who don't understand it will say, well, are you just wanting attention? And I think, that is something that I have been called an attention seeker myself. I have had a doctor turn around to me and call me manipulative because of what I've said or what I've done. Or I think he wrote in my notes, a difficult case from a manipulative patient. And that was the first line in his write up about what had happened. And that was following a suicide attempt. So I think awareness and understanding is definitely something that needs to be improved, because I didn't do that because I thought, oh well, if I try to kill myself, I'm going to end up in A&E and I'm going to get this attention that I'm craving. That's not my goal. I felt like I didn't want to be around anymore, and that was my goal. And I didn't want to be saved. I didn't, I was in a very dark place, and I didn't want to have somebody make that worse in some respects.
So, and I'm glad you said, because you used the word awareness as I'm listening to you. And I think, I don't know how it is in the UK right now, but in the US, in the last couple of years, we've heard the word mental health so much. And it's really just become this thing. And it's about awareness. Everyone's story begins somewhere. All
Yeah.
of our stories begin somewhere. And it's to be able to trace back to the beginning of the story. Like,
Mhm.
when did the person begin to feel the way they're now feeling? No one gets up in the morning and says, well, I think I'm just going to cut off my hand, or I'm going to cut
Yeah.
myself, or I don't think anyone just does
And I
that.
think that's an important thing to talk about, is the fact that, like, nobody just gets up and thinks, no one in their right mind would want to take a sharp object or something that's going to hurt themselves in any way to their body. Like, and no one in their right mind would want to do that. Like, there must be something going on either emotionally or at home, or something that is causing them to just not be able to deal with that background, that background thing that's going on.
Hmm.
For me, it was the fact that I was bullied quite badly at school, and I was bullied to the point where a bully physically attacked me. Yeah,
Yeah.
mental health, and it's also understanding that when someone says to you, describe addiction, or when someone says to you, what is addiction, the first thing that might come to their mind is, well, a substance, such as drugs, such as alcohol, such
Yes.
as, you know, and then you think, okay, think in a wider perspective, think of what else could be an addiction. And I think self-harm is usually one of those, the last things that people would think of as an addiction. And I think it's just down to those people just don't understand why someone would want to do it. Like, I know my father, for example, doesn't understand why I did it, and I don't think he ever will. But that is down to the fact that he just doesn't understand, and some people won't understand. You can talk about it until you're blue in the face, and you can talk to somebody and you can try and get them to understand. But if they just don't understand, and they can't, because some people have to experience it in order to understand what it's like.
It's really difficult to put ourselves in the shoes of another person,
Oh, definitely, yes.
especially when we haven't walked that road. So, because when you talk about understanding, a lot of people obviously they're just going to say, "Well, why would you want to hurt yourself, or
Mm,
why would you want to? I would never do that." That's what a lot of people would say, but that is because they have not experienced what that person's experienced,
yeah,
and then different people deal with things differently. We're all not built the same way. Some people are able to persevere and push through and just completely deal with something differently, and someone else is not, and that doesn't make the person weaker. It just means that we handle things differently as people. But the understanding thing is really crucial, because if someone can't understand why you might be experiencing something or why you're feeling the way you're feeling, then it's very difficult for them to have empathy,
yeah.
and to
And it's very
sympathize with what
difficult
you
for
might be
them
going
to
through.
even start and find out how to help you, because
Yes.
they just don't know. They can't pick up on the subtle, maybe, if they've never kind of experienced it or have any sort of relation to that particular experience, whether that be trauma, whether that be mental health in general, whether it be addiction. you know they would find it harder to pick up on those non-verbal signs
Hmm.
that you're becoming unwell. Different people deal with it differently.
Yes.
I think that's important, especially in terms of recovery and addiction, or even recovery and trauma, is that
Hmm.
what I experience, and even if you were to experience something very, very similar to what I've experienced, like for example, say if I was to become addicted to alcohol and you'd become addicted to alcohol, it doesn't mean that we're going to recover in the same way. And it doesn't mean that we're going to, one of us might recover and one of us might completely not recover and always struggle it for the rest of their lives. So,
That's true.
and also, that is a blunt comparison, but also when you're going through recovery, don't look at the person next to you and go, oh, they're doing really well, so I should be as well. And yeah, that's a good mentality to have, and use them as an inspiration, but don't put so much pressure on yourself as if to say, well, I should be that far in my recovery because I've been alcohol free for so long.
Even if they haven't had that experience, they haven't been around anyone else who's had that experience.
Mm.
And so a lot of times when we're new to things, we're only trying to make sense of it based off of what we know, right? Not
Yeah.
necessarily seeking broader knowledge to be able to understand what it is that's going on. And that even though I may not see it the way you see it, but I still have the ability to be able to try to understand why you see it the way you see it, and be able to work with you from that
Yeah.
perspective.
And I
And that
think
is
the big word
very
there is
difficult for people to
education, and
do. Yeah.
educating yourself
Yeah.
on, even if you just think, okay, my daughter or my son or my friend has been diagnosed with, I don't know, bipolar, for example, and that is their diagnosis. Go actually taking the time to go onto Google or to the NHS website here, or whatever website that you have that go, because NHS is probably for us one of the biggest websites that we can go to look up any condition.
Yeah.
So
For her, it's the CDC, the Centers for Disease
CDC
and
for you, yeah.
Control.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
CDC for America or NHS for here, where you
Yeah.
can literally just, I mean, for the NHS, you can filter it by the first letter of the condition. So even just taking that time to go to the NHS website and to click on B for bipolar, click on the bipolar
Hmm.
link, and actually just read about it and educate it. Even if you can't understand it, still educating yourself as to what that person might experience as a direct result of that condition.
I think another thing that we can touch on is, and you already brought it up, addiction. People usually think drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
Addiction is also sex. Addiction is anything that you become so that you must have it. It just
Yeah.
dominates your life. And because of that, now there could be so many different types of reasons why someone's struggling with their mental health. And as I said, now we see it more. We Mental Health Awareness Month, mental health.
Yeah.
Oh, you've seen it just even on social media.
And people were talking briefly about those stories. I think I saw it on Twitter where they were like hashtag me too. And they were
Hmm.
talking about like their experience being sexually abused. And that's, one of the hashtags I can think of.
Hmm. Yeah. And so now mental health is more of a factor in society, I think.
Mm,
People used to just dismiss it as, well, this person's crazy.
mm.
They just, and people would laugh at, you know, someone who saying that they're struggling with their mental health. Oh,
Yeah.
you just need to get over it, or you just need to. It's become
Yeah.
something that we actually pay attention to now.
Yeah, and even
Yeah.
if like, I mean, obviously I'm from a completely different generation to say you are, for example, but also my grandparents' generation, that it just wasn't talked about at all. So as we've kind
Hmm.
of gone through society and we've kind of gone down the generations,
Yes.
you know, more people are talking about it. And I think, yes, we've got the celebrities that talk about it. Yes, we've got the doctors like yourself who talk about it, but also people like myself who are talking from personal experience. And having platforms such as YouTube, such as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, where you can talk about it and you can try and raise awareness for a certain condition that you either know about or you've experienced.
One thing though, you realize it's there's a lot of education that needs to be done.
Mm,
And you brought up something about your dad earlier. What
yeah,
I've also realized sometimes is there might be a parent or a family member who just blows it off
yeah,
because they tell you, back in my day, we didn't deal with all that type of stuff. And these people
mm,
today, they're so soft talking about mental health. Just
yeah,
just push through it. Just
yeah.
work hard, just do whatever the case is. What are you talking about mental health? That's so soft. That's so and but it's always been there. It's just now more visible,
Yeah.
right?
And it's more
Eh,
people who are actually coming forward
yes.
and saying, I struggle with this, rather than having
Hmm.
people who just think, oh, I can't talk about it because so and so or the society in general will think I'm crazy.
Going back to the addiction side, what I've seen a lot of people, their addiction that led to a mental health situation, and this is one of the reasons why they a lot of times are living with a lot of guilt. And I've heard so many times, my parents didn't raise me like this. I was brought up in a good home, but somehow, they ended up using drugs or alcohol, whatever the case is. And then there is this guilt, this embarrassment that, they've caused their kids harm. And
Yeah.
not necessarily physical harm, but in the sense of, I can't be a good mother right now because I'm always trying to deal with prescription pills and
Yeah,
all
or
that sort of
even
stuff. And I'm
like,
in,
in the
yeah,
case of America, I mean, you pay for all of your like medical expenses. So
yes.
like
Hmm.
if the person who's addicted, because a lot of the time, if you're addicted to a substance, from my knowledge, it is an expensive thing to be addicted to. Like, if you're only having, say, a drink in the evening and that is your cool down, you're having with one drink and that is how you sort yourself out, and that not it's not necessarily addiction, but when it becomes an addiction to the point where you can't go a day without having a drink, for example,
Exactly.
it can become very expensive because you're drinking it in a much bigger quantity than
Hmm.
somebody who's just having that one bottle of beer of an evening.
Yeah, yeah. And then you see people develop this, just call it an unhealthy mental lifestyle
Yeah,
because they are unhappy with who they've become, with
yeah,
the choices that they've made. And so that's what I see a lot when it comes to addiction. A lot of people just they're so ashamed of, and that's been one of the biggest hurdles that I've had to deal with working with someone who struggles with addiction, is trying to get them to not forget the past, because you can't do that, but trying to get them to, the past is an experience. It is something to be learned from. But if you continue to dwell in that past, then you can't possibly enjoy the future that you're hoping to have
yeah. And I
because
think
you're
that's
still
one of the
living in the
things that I
past.
that I
Yeah.
kind of, because I've got scars, from self-harming, and I have learned to accept them, not necessarily, learned to be okay with it, but learned to kind of, look at my wrists and look at other places that I've self-harmed and be like, that is my past, but I am so excited for the future and where I'm going, what I am going to achieve and what I am going to, become in a way. And that was actually probably one of my biggest motivators to start a YouTube channel, was to kind of say it's okay to have a history with drug, alcohols, with self-harm, with anything that you're addicted to. It's okay to have that history, as long as you're able to say to yourself, I accept that that is my past, but it isn't my future. And actually, I think that
Exactly.
is a good ending for our video, actually. So
Yes.
that a good positive message to end on. So thank you so much again for reaching out to me on Instagram, and maybe we'll have to do this again in the future, like do something
Yes,
a different
sure,
topic.
sure. We could talk about whatever. I mean,
Yeah,
I
no,
could talk about
definitely. And I
it.
think it's so
It's fine.
nice how both our channels align in a way that we can talk about mental health, and both our channels benefit from having a discussion. So
Yes, yes.
um but yeah, thank
Thank
you
you for
very much
having
for
me.
joining me today. And I will leave all the links to your social media and your YouTube channel in the description box below. So yeah, it's been lovely talking to you.
Same. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.